My birthday has always felt invisible. I stopped expecting balloons or cake years ago, but deep down, I guess a part of me still hoped that this year would be different. I was turning 22 after all. I'd just finished a tough semester at college, all my finals, even got invited to join a prestigious cybersecurity firm for an internship. Maybe Dad would notice. Maybe he'd say he was proud. So when he asked me to come home that weekend, I said yes. Silly me thought maybe he had something planned. When I stepped through the front door, I heard laughter, music, the smell of catered food filling the house. I paused, a little shocked, but then I smiled. Maybe this time, just maybe, it was for me. I followed the noise into the living room, and that's when I saw it. A huge banner that read, "Congratulations, Derek." My half-brother, beaming in the center of the room. A champagne flute in hand, surrounded by friends, co-workers, and our father, Richard Carson. Derek had just closed some deal at Dad's company. Something flashy and vague, like most of Derek's wins. And there I was, standing at the edge of the room in my travel clothes, backpack still slung over my shoulder, watching everyone cheers for him. I swallowed hard. No one noticed me. When I finally walked up to Dad, trying to at least get a hello, he looked down at me and said, "Don't sulk, Maya. It's not a good look. Let your brother have his moment." My throat tightened. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out, so I backed away. Slowly, quietly, I spent the rest of the evening upstairs in my old room, which, to my surprise, looked emptier than I remembered. When the party ended, I heard a soft knock. Dad stepped in, holding an envelope. He placed it on the desk without even looking at me. "You're smart. You'll figure it out. It's time you started living on your own." Then he walked out. Inside the envelope was a $50 bill and a folded pamphlet for a cheap apartment complex in the next town over. I just sat there. Happy birthday to me. The next morning, I woke up early, hoping last night had just been a weird dream. But it wasn't. When I went downstairs, I found a black trash bag by the door. My stuff, some clothes, a few books, and my laptop, dumped in like leftovers from a garage sale. My old childhood photos? Gone. The scarf Mom had knitted before. She passed. I found it shoved under a pair of old shoes. Denise, my stepmother, stood in the kitchen, sipping her coffee like it was just another day. She looked up and smiled. A fake plastic kind of smile. "Morning, Maya. There's toast on the counter, if you want." "Oh, and don't forget to return the house key," I wanted to scream. But I just nodded. Quiet. Calm. I always was the quiet one. It's funny. When Mom died, I thought things couldn't get worse. But then Denise moved in like a shadow. She and Derek were loud, shiny, and always center stage. I was the girl in the background, the one who fixed Wi-Fi problems and helped Derek with his math homework behind closed doors. Dad used to say I was too serious, like being responsible was a character flaw. But now, serious Maya was being tossed, out with a trash bag on her birthday. I didn't even get a ride. I walked 2 miles to the bus stop, carrying everything I owned. On the ride to Amber's place, my college roommate, I kept my head against the window, tears silently slipping down my cheek. Amber didn't ask questions when I showed up. She just hugged me, cleared out a drawer, and ordered takeout. That night, while she slept, I stared at the ceiling and told myself something I hadn't dared to believe in years. They don't get to define me anymore. And then I remembered something they had forgotten. I still had full back-end access to Dad's company systems. I'd helped build their entire internal payment structure during my internship. I had quietly written the security protocols, the multi-level access chains, and emergency override scripts. I never used them. But now I had nothing to lose, and everything to take back. 3 days passed. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't even feel numb. I felt sharp, awake, like something inside me had finally clicked. Amber had gone to work, and I was sitting cross-legged on her floor, staring at my laptop. I hadn't touched it since I left Dad's house, but now I opened it with purpose. Line by line, I logged into Carson Tech's internal system. Every bit of back-end code. Still there. Still mine. I hadn't touched the system since last summer, when Dad asked me to volunteer my skills. No credit, no internship letter, just a pat on the head and a, "You're good with computers, right?" What he didn't realize was that I'd written the security layers myself. Every time Denise's credit card pinged for another spa day, or Derek ordered bottle service on a corporate card, those transactions flowed through a system I designed. Dad had said I was too sensitive, but what he didn't see was that I never forgot. Like the time they took a vacation to Italy and told me last minute there wasn't enough room. Or when I came home with a scholarship letter, and he said, "Well, that's less money I have to waste." I clicked through the access logs, their corporate Amex, personal credit cards, expense accounts. I could see them all. Every overcharge, every fake expense Derek claimed, every wire Denise sent to her sister marked as a consulting fee. And then it hit me. These weren't just petty luxuries. This was financial fraud. Derek was skimming money from Dad's company to fund his lifestyle, and Dad either didn't know or didn't care. I sat back, closed my eyes, and let the silence hold me. Then I did something small. Just a flick of a switch. I froze Denise's. Corporate card first, not deleted, just suspended. Enough to cause confusion. Enough to make her call someone. The first domino. I wasn't even sure what I wanted yet. Revenge? Justice? No. I wanted them to feel what I felt. Powerless. Forgotten. And I wanted them to know exactly who made it happen. The next morning, I woke up to 6 missed calls from an unknown number. I didn't answer. I just smiled. Amber walked in with coffee and sat beside me. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Just letting the wind blow where it wants." She gave me that look, half concerned, half proud, and didn't press. I opened my laptop and checked the admin panel. Sure enough, Denise had tried to use her company card 3 times yesterday. Once at a luxury salon, twice at her favorite boutique. All declined. All logged. Within 2 hours, Carson Tech's CFO emailed Derek. Unusual activity on corporate account. And that's when the panic started. Derek called me next. His name flashed across my screen like poison. I let it ring out. Then came Dad. I picked up. "Maya," he barked. No hello. No apology. Just his voice sharp and annoyed. "Did you mess with our system? Denise's cards aren't working. Derek's account is locked." I sat there, letting him fill the silence with his entitled rage. "You better fix this," he growled. "I gave you an opportunity. You owe this family." I cut him off, quietly. "I don't owe you anything, Dad." There was a pause. He wasn't used to me talking. "Back. What did you say?" I said, "You kicked me out. On my birthday, remember?" "Maya, don't get emotional. You're making things worse." I ended the call. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't need to. The control they used to have over me? Gone. Just like that. By sunset, Denise had posted a not-so-cryptic status about betrayal from within. Derek was frantically emailing IT. Dad even messaged Amber, thinking she could talk some sense into me. Amber just sent me a screenshot and wrote, "Want me to frame it?" I laughed harder than I had in months. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. They weren't going to go down quietly. They'd fight back. They'd twist the story. They always did. which is why I needed more than card suspensions and awkward dinner conversations. I needed something final, public, legal, and that meant only one thing. It was time to open Mom's locked filing cabinet. The old filing cabinet had been in storage since Mom passed away. Dad never bothered with it. He once said, "Your mother was sentimental about useless things." I hadn't touched it either. Until now. Amber drove me to the storage unit. It was dark, dusty, and cold. The metal cabinet stood like a forgotten shrine in the corner, dented but still locked. Mom had always told me, if anything ever feels wrong, trust your gut. And trust the papers. Back then, I didn't understand. Now I did. I picked the lock, easier than expected. I'd taught myself when I was 16, just in case. The top drawer was full of old tax forms, birth certificates, and letters. But then, the second drawer. A single manila folder, labeled in Mom's soft cursive, Maya, in case you need to know. My hand shook. Inside were copies of business documents I had never seen. Stock allocations, co-founder agreements, and something that made my breath catch in my throat. A notarized letter naming me as a 40% shareholder of Carson Tech. My name, my mother's signature, dated 2 years before she died. And it was legal. Read every word. Mom had invested in Dad's company during its startup days, using money from her parents. She had always told Dad to make sure I was protected. That if anything happened to her, I wouldn't be pushed aside. He had ignored it. Worse, he'd hidden it. There was also a handwritten note. Just for me. Maya, if you're reading this, then you've been hurt by them in ways I feared. I tried to believe your father would do right by you. But if he didn't, this is your proof. Don't let them erase you. You come from strength. Use it. I cried for the first time since the birthday dinner. Not out of pain, but out of relief. Out of feeling seen, heard, believed. All my life I thought I was invisible to them, but not to her. I placed the folder gently back in the envelope and zipped it into my backpack. Tomorrow I was calling a lawyer. If they wanted to play dirty, they'd better be ready for what came next. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mother's voice and my father's laughter. Cold, dismissive, always one step ahead. Not anymore. 9 a.m. I walked into the law firm of Jacobs and Blythe. Corporate litigation, estate disputes, the works. I didn't even have an appointment. I just asked for whoever handled shareholder rights. I expected to wait hours. They saw me in 10 minutes. Mr. Blythe looked like someone out of a courtroom drama. Gray hair, razor-sharp glasses, a calm voice that said he'd shredded men like my father before breakfast. I handed him the folder. He read in silence. 5 minutes. 10. Then he looked up. "Miss Carson, are you aware of what this means?" "I think so," I whispered. 40% ownership? He nodded slowly. "But it's more than that. If this is valid, and I believe it is, you're not just a shareholder. You're a founding stakeholder with voting power. Your signature can stall company decisions, block expenses, and freeze accounts." I blinked. I already froze the credit cards. He actually smiled. "Then you've got good instincts." My fingers curled into my lap. "What happens next?" "Well," he said, folding the documents, "we file a legal notice to the board. Your father and his family will have to answer under oath why these documents were never disclosed. And depending on how petty you want to be," I looked him in the eye, "I want them to know what it feels like, to be treated like a burden, to be pushed to the kitchen while the family eats cake in another room." He nodded. "Then we'll file it all. Shareholder petition, mismanagement claims, and a quiet little motion to remove Denise's company perks. Legally this time, I stood to leave. He said one more thing. Most people come in here furious, trembling, ready to burn everything. You came in with a file and a mother's letter. That's more powerful than anger. I walked out lighter. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's leftover. I felt like someone's legacy. And they were about to find out just how loud silence could speak. They didn't see it coming. Not even a little. 3 days after my meeting with Mr. Blythe, a courier hand-delivered the legal notice to Carson Tech's executive floor. Right as Denise was leading a budget meeting, the receptionist later told me the room went dead silent. Denise froze mid-sentence. My father's hand paused over his coffee, and then his face turned red. Not confused, not worried, furious, because he knew exactly what was in that envelope. The letter from Mom, the shareholder documents, the notice of motion. I didn't witness it, but I imagined it so vividly, it felt like I had. Amber was the one who sent me the text. Your dad just stormed out of the building. Denise looks like she's seen a ghost. I smiled. They weren't scared of the court. They were scared of the truth. That night, my phone rang. It was Dad. I didn't answer. He left a message. Maya, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. You don't understand how complicated these things are. Let's be adults and fix this like family. I nearly laughed. Family? Where was that word on my birthday? Where was that word when Denise told me to watch the dishes at my own party? No. He didn't want to talk like family. He wanted to control, like always. 2 hours later, I got an email from his assistant asking if I would withdraw the shareholder petition in exchange for a quiet settlement and access to a family trust. I wrote back one line. I'm not settling. I'm reclaiming. By the next morning, Carson Tech's board had frozen 2 major executive payments pending resolution of the ownership dispute. Dad couldn't use company credit. Denise's corporate car was revoked, and the housekeepers, paid by the company, were let go. That's when the real calls began. From my stepbrother, my aunt, even Nicole. Suddenly, the girl they all ignored had become very relevant. But I wasn't answering yet. I needed them to sit in it, to feel what silence felt like, to understand what it meant to be left behind while others toasted champagne. Only then could they truly grasp what they'd done. I hadn't seen that house since the night they kicked me out. Back then, it felt like a fortress I didn't belong in, every wall echoing with someone else's laughter, someone else's rules. But this time, it was different. I pulled into the driveway in a borrowed blazer and flats, hair tied back, documents tucked neatly in my bag. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was clarity, dignity, and the right to not be erased. When the door opened, it wasn't Dad who stood there. It was Denise. Her smile was tight. Too tight, like a rubber band about to snap. Maya, she said, like I was an unexpected guest. You didn't call. I stepped in without answering. The living room looked smaller now, maybe because I was no longer shrinking to fit into it. Dad was sitting on the leather sofa, staring at the TV, pretending I wasn't there. 5 minutes, I said. He muted the screen. You made your point, he muttered. Did I? I opened my folder, laying the stamped court documents on the table. You kept my stake hidden for years. You used Mom's silence like it was your right. You celebrated my birthday by throwing me out, and now you want to pretend this is all some misunderstanding? Denise tried to jump in. Maya, you don't know what it's like running a business. Things get complicated. I turned to her, calm, steady. No. What's complicated is pretending someone doesn't exist while using their inheritance to pay for your gym memberships. Dad flinched. You're angry, he said. This is about emotion, not logic. You're right, I said. It is about emotion. It's about a daughter watching her father build a new family while treating her like baggage. It's about dignity. You took that from me. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing there. Good. Because that sad little girl he once controlled, she was gone. As I stood to leave, I slid the final paper across the table, a formal request for accounting of all executive family perks paid with company funds. He didn't speak. He just sat there, jaw tight, hand trembling, and I walked out. Not in anger, but in peace. Because for the first time, the house didn't own me. I owned it. After that day, everything changed. The quiet battles became public whispers. Social media picked up the story. Local news ran pieces on family feuds at Carson Tech, and suddenly, I wasn't just Maya, the forgotten daughter. I was Maya, the woman who stood up, who refused to be silenced. At work, colleagues approached me with quiet nods of respect. Some admitted they always wondered if I was as invisible as my family made me seem. Others asked how I found the courage to fight back. But the hardest part wasn't the attention. It was the silence from those who once said I was nothing. My phone kept ringing. Calls from distant relatives I never knew cared. Lawyers wanting to negotiate. Even old family friends pleading for peace. I didn't return most calls. Not yet. Because peace without justice isn't peace at all. Then came the court hearings. Sitting in that courtroom, watching my father and sister squirm under questioning, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Validation. Their excuses, their lies, their attempts to paint me as a troublemaker. They all fell apart piece by piece. And when the judge ruled in my favor, confirming my rightful stake and ordering a full audit of the company's finances, something inside me broke free. The girl who was kicked out on her birthday. The girl who sat alone in the kitchen at her own family's party. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who reclaimed her name, her dignity, her legacy. I looked around that courtroom, met my father's eyes, and saw for the first time not a man who owned me, but one who feared me, because I wasn't just his daughter anymore. I was his equal. And that changed everything. The court case was over, but the real victory was inside me. For years, I thought home was the place where my family lived. The house, the parties, the familiar faces. But that night when I was kicked out, I realized home isn't a building. It's respect. It's love. It's being seen. Walking away from the courthouse, clutching the final ruling, I felt lighter than I had in a decade. My father's control had cracked, but more importantly, my spirit had healed. I moved into a small apartment with enough sunlight to remind me every day that I was free. I decorated it with things I loved: books, plants, photos of moments that mattered to me, not anyone else. My phone still buzzed with messages. Some family members apologized, others stayed silent, but I no longer needed their approval. I had found my worth inside. Then came a surprise invitation from my younger brother, the one who quietly watched it all unfold. "Can we talk?" he asked. We met at a cafe, away from the shadows of the house. He apologized for the way I was treated, for not standing up sooner. Tears welled up as we talked. Not just about the past, but about building a new future. For the first time, I believed family could mean something different. Not perfect, not flawless, but honest and kind. That night, as I locked the door to my apartment, I whispered to myself, I'm not just the daughter who was kicked out on her birthday. I'm Maya, a woman who fought back, who reclaimed her story, and finally found her home.